In this lecture, we want to take a look at equality and relational operators in C. So just like in arithmetic, we have equality and relational operators like greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, as well as equal to or not equal to. We also have their equivalent in C, because we may want to create programs to express the relationship between the two numbers to check if one number is equal to, or if one or two quantities are equal to, whether they are the same, they are equivalent, whether one quantity is greater than the other quantity, or they are greater than or equal to, or any of those relational or equality operators. We want to check the relationship between two or more values, quantities, or numbers. So this is where these equality and relational operators comes in handy. And then as you can see, we have the greater than, and then we have its equivalent in C. We have greater than or equal to, and then this is its equivalent in C. Less than or equal to, as well as the equality operators equal to and not equal to. Also, in this same lecture, we want to introduce what we call control structures. Control structures in C, there are three control structures in C. We have what we call sequential, selection, and iteration control structures. So the first one, we have already encountered the first one, which is sequential. Now, when we say control structures, when we see sequential control structures, we talk about when we create program sequentially, like in our first and in the first program that we created, and the second program where we wrote instructions. Now those programs are going to be executed. Those instructions that we wrote to create our program, they are going to be executed one after the other. In the order in which they are written, they are going to be executed one after the other, from the first instruction to the last instruction, sequentially, just as the name suggests, sequentially, one after the other. So, but that is not what happens in selection and sequential, in selection and in iteration control structure. So in selection control structures, it comes in three varieties. We have the if single selection statement, which perform an action or group of actions only if a condition is true. So what it does is it's going to check a condition, and if that condition is true, then it's going to perform an action or some group of actions. And then the other one is the double selection control structure with the if else. Now this perform one action if a condition is true, and another entirely different action if the condition is false. And then we also have the third selection control structure called the switch, and it is the multiple selection statement, and it's going to perform many different actions depending on the value of an expression. So in this lecture, we are going to make use of this if single selection statement or control structure. Call it if single selection statement or control structure, together with relational and equality operator to check relationship between numbers. Alright, so for the purpose of this lecture, I've already created a file. I've called it relationship.c. So, and we are going to create a program that will decide relationship between numbers. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to prompt the user to enter two numbers. So using print format, I'm going to make use of print format function and prompt the user to enter two numbers. Alright. So before that, so prompt the user to enter two numbers. Enter two numbers to check the relationship between the numbers, to check the relationship between them, to check the relationship between them. Alright, so I have make use of print format function to pass a string to it as argument, and it's going to print out this string enter two numbers to check the relationship between them, which is a prompt. It's going to ask the user, is going to prompt the user to enter two numbers. All right, but so far for our first two programs we created, we have been using this print format this way. However, it exposes our code to attacks. It's not using the print format this way. It's not safe. So the more safer way of using print format to safeguard it from attacks is to make use of is to pass two arguments to it by making use of a format control string. So I'm going to do. I'm going to make use of format control string and pass %s conversion specifier. So this percentage symbol and then this s is a conversion specifier for string, and a conversion specifier is a placeholder. So this means that as soon as the compiler sees this, it knows that this is a placeholder for a string. So it is going to look for a string after this comma. Unfortunately, we have a string here, so it's going to replace this percentage symbol and this s with the string that is here. So instead of printing these two arguments like the way it is, it's going to print only the string. So it's going to replace this conversion specifier for string with this particular string, so that in the output we only see this prompt, enter two numbers, to check the relationship between them. So using this print format this way is much more safer. But if you want to use, if you want to pass just one argument, then we can make use of the put function. There is an alternative function called put, and then we can pass our string that we want to have print out. Enter two numbers to check the relationship between them. All right. Also, the difference between print format and put is that put automatically put a new line, so we don't need to put /n, which is an escape sequence for a new line, which will create a new line, push our cursor to the beginning of the next line, so that if there is any output after this enter two numbers to check the relationship between them, if there is any other output, is going to be printed out in the next line. If we are using put, we don't need this /n. It will automatically move our cursor to the new line. But if we are using print format and we want a new line, then we have to put a /n. Now this will make sure that our cursor moves to the next line. But in this case, I don't want to create any new line. I want to make use of print format. So let me delete this one. All right. So the next thing, what we are going to do now is we are going to declare the two variables which will represent the two numbers that the user is going to enter via the keyboard. So I'm going to enter number 1 and number 2. So I've declared two variables in a single line, which is another way of declaring variables instead of declaring them on a separate line. All right, so I have declared two variables within the same line, and this tells the compiler that number 1 and number 2, they are variables of integer data type. So now I'm going to make use of scanf format function to now get the numbers from the keyboard, and making use of %d, telling the compiler that there are some decimal integers from the keyboard that I want you to get it and make them available to the program. Okay, and then I'm going to make use of address operator number 1 and then address of number 2. So this will get the two numbers and then allocate them to the variable location that has been named number 1 and number 2 in the computer memory, and save those values there. Okay, so now our program has number 1 and number 2 that the user has entered. Now we can proceed to make use of if selection statement to check the relationship between the two numbers. And the way this if selection statement works, if single selection statement works, is that we just put the keyword if and then followed by the condition that we want to check. Now we want to check the relationship between the two numbers. So I want to check if number 1 is first of all greater than number 2. Now if this statement is true, then I want it to execute this action. I want it to print to the user that these two numbers are equal. That these two numbers are equal. So let me make use of put. The two numbers are equal. sorry, I'm not testing for equality, but I'm testing for greater than. So let me put D, that is which is a conversion specifier for number one, and then is greater than number two, and then this is a conversion specifier for number one and number two. Now I'm going to replace the name. I'm going to specify the number one and number two that I want to be replaced by this placeholder, which is a conversion specifier for decimal integers. I'm going to now make available the two numbers that I want to be substituted with these conversion specifiers, which is number one and number two. All right, so let me put end if comment to show that this closing brace is for end if. All right, so what we are doing now is we are checking if we have the condition if number one, all right, there's no space here, if number one, which is the variable here that we created and which the user has entered the equivalent values via the keyboard. Now we are checking if number one is greater than number two, then we want this statement to be printed out that number one, so the compiler will look after this comma, what is the number that is there. Number one is going to replace it with this conversion specifier. Number one is greater than number two, and then all we have printed on the keyboard is number one is greater than number two, depending on what the user entered as number one and number two, right? And that is how we continue doing until we exhaust checking all the other conditions. So all the other conditions, which is the other equality and relational operators that we have. So let me just copy this and then paste it. So we have greater than or equal to. So we are checking for if is greater than or equal to, or equal to if number one is greater than or equal to number two. All right, now next we are going to check for less than. So if number one is less than number two, so if number one is less than number two, so after checking for less than, let's check for less than or equal to. So we are checking for less than or equal to, so whether number one is less than or equal to, is less than or equal to number two. All right, now next we want to check for equality. So if number one is not equal to number two, so number one is equal to number two. Now next we check for inequality. So if number one is not equal to, if number one is not equal to number two, so if number one is not equal to number two, is not equal to number two, so if number one is not equal to number two, so if number one is not equal to number two. All right, so let me save the program. So far we have exhausted all the conditions. We have checked for greater than or equal to, we have checked for less than or equal to, we have checked for equality, and we checked for inequality. So let me go to the terminal, try to compile the program, and then if there is any error, then we come back and fix the issue. So I'm going to go to the terminal, and then I'm going to run GCC followed by the name of the program, which is relationship, and then I want to have the final compiled output as relationship. And I'm going to hit enter. It's the same as all right. Yes, I made an issue. I made a little mistake. Relationship.c. I want it outputted as relationship. Okay, so two main argument of function put. It's not equal to. Okay, put. All right. it's not equal to. All right, so I can't. Okay, this is not print format. I made a mistake. This is put, not print format. So let me go and substitute. I made a big blunder there. So it's not put. I can't use put with conversion specifier. So let me substitute it with printf. So also here with printf. So also likewise here, and let me substitute it with printf. The reason is that I'm using formatted output. I can't use this conversion specifier with put. So, and I've used conversion specifier with put. So I have to use it with print format function. All right, so okay, so let me save it. So now let me go back and fix the issue again, and then I'm going to come here and clear the screen, and then I'm going to recompile the program. So our program has compiled successfully. Now let's run the program and then see how it is going to look like. So enter two numbers to check the relationship between them. So let me enter 34 and let me enter 56. Hit enter. So we have 34 is less than 56. 34 is less than or equal to 56. 34 is not equal to 56. Let me just make some little amendments so that we can see the output more clearly. Let me make sure all the output are on a separate line. So let me come back to the code here. So after each output, let's create a new line. Let's move the next output to the new line. So I'm just going to put an escape sequence for a new line character, so that after the output is going to move the cursor to a new line. So likewise here, I'm going to put /n, which is an escape sequence. So /n is called an escape sequence, and we have many of such types of escape sequence, and this /n is an escape sequence for a new line, meaning that it is going to move the cursor to the new line, so that if there is any other output, it is going to appear on a new line. Likewise here, a new line, and then we have here as well, new line. So I'm going to save it. Now let me go back and recompile and rerun the program. So let me clear the terminal and then compile the program again successfully. It has compiled successfully. So let me run it again. Enter two numbers to check the relationship between them. So 34 and 78. Hit enter. So we can see 34 is less than 78, which is true. 34 is less than or equal to 78, which is true, and 34 is not equal to 78, which is also true. So in this program, we have seen relational and equality operators, and we have also seen if single selection statements and how what are they and how they work. So thank you for watching these lectures.